Heaven and hell suppose two distinct species of men, the good and the bad, but the greatest part of mankind float betwixt vice and virtue. So, David Hume was the Scottish philosopher from the 18th century that helped accelerate the field of empiricism to an unprecedented level of skepticism, tear down our assumptions of cause and effect, pioneer the mentality of proportioning our beliefs to the evidence, and break down previously unforeseen biases in trying to understand the nature of God. There is a long-running, misguided association between skepticism and misery that I wish to clear up first. A lot of people, when hearing about skepticism, feel as though it just ruins everything great in the world, because of the notion that ignorance is bliss. I got the following example from one of my favorite philosophy podcasts, Philosophize This, who I will link in the description. Being a skeptic is like being a person watching Star Wars for the first time, who asks the group he is watching with, why are there explosions if they are in space? To the people around them, they might get hostile and say things like, thanks, you just ruined Star Wars. Even though one can still enjoy the movie completely independent of the fantastical elements. The same goes for skeptics in real life, especially David Hume. He maintained optimism in his skepticism throughout his entire life, even on his deathbed. Adam Smith, another important Scottish philosopher and economist who invented modern capitalism as we know it, was a close friend of Hume, and remarked as such on Hume's deathbed. Poor David Hume is dying fast, but with more real cheerfulness and good humor, and with more real resignation to the necessary course of things, than any whining Christian ever died with pretend resignation to the will of God. Putting aside Adam Smith's beliefs about religion, you can hear the genuine admiration of his friend, even on his deathbed. Hume's mentality was that what happened before birth does not concern us, so neither should after death. If we do indeed have an immortal soul, then it extends infinitely in both directions. In which case, since there is an infinite amount of time before our birth equal to the time after death, which we are not concerned with, we should be equally ambivalent to the infinity after death, at least in regards to whether or not we possess a soul that exists separate from the body. Even on his own deathbed, his commitment to this skepticism prevented him from descending into misery that plagues so many others. One area that he applied to skepticism was to break down the maxim of causality and point out some assumptions we were making in causal inferences. Using billiard balls as an example, we observe a collision between two of them. Based on all of our experiences in our own lives seeing pool balls collide in the past, we infer that the first ball causes the second ball to move when they come into contact with one another. A causal inference. Hume wanted to point out that just because one event follows another does not necessarily mean that there is a causal link between the two. Like night and day follow each other, but it doesn't mean that they cause each other. He thought, since we have no way of verifying for absolute certainty that event 1 causes event 2, with any other tool but our senses, we end up making probabilistic judgments of the event 2 occurring after event 1. We can never be certain, but we still navigate the world nevertheless. So how do we do it? Hume claims that custom is the great guide of human life. We are used to seeing that pool ball 2 moves after the collision, and it happens every single time that we've encountered it so far. So, because it is customary, we treat it as truth and apply it to the future. It may seem strange to apply this to something as clear as billiard balls, but the same mindset of custom guiding our inferences is used when events are merely correlated and not causally linked. yet we treat them the same. Like good books have to make bad movies, or that happiness and intelligence are inversely proportional, or basically any topic covered in any episode of Adam Ruins Everything. To most average people, the difference between causality and false correlation does not exist, and are treated as equals when they navigate the world, since we base our judgments off of our own personal past experiences, which may hold biases we are unaware of. His ultimate goal, with all applications of skepticism, was simply to proportion his beliefs to the evidence, not to his pre-existing biases. One of Hume's most famous critiques as a skeptic is his objections to the teleological proof of God. Teleological may sound like a really big, fancy word, but a good way to explain it would be Paley's watchmaker thesis, popular at the time and even today. For the thought experiment, let's say you are walking along the beach. You come across a watch lying in the sand. It stands out from the landscape and is clearly man-made with a designated purpose. It's a watch after all. Even if you had never seen a watch before in your life, if one were to take it apart and look at how each of the pieces function, one could see that every piece has an intended purpose to it, and designed intentionally. The watch is also far too intricate and detailed to have just come about by random chance. So, you infer that there must therefore be a watchmaker somewhere in the world, created the watch with this specific function in mind. This thought experiment has been used for centuries to prove the existence of God as the grand watchmaker of the cosmos, given how complex and intricate yet ordered the universe is. People at the time looked at, for example, the complexity and specific functions of eyes, and came to the conclusion that it was more similar to a watch than to like a rock per se, since it was extremely complex and has a specific function that it does relatively well. The Newtonian laws of physics, brand new at the time, also gave support for the watchmaker argument, given how orderly the cosmos functioned under the equations, like clockwork, and such order cannot be derived any other way except by a grand designer, which they refer to as God. Before I continue, keep in mind, as well, that Hume is responding to this proof a century before Darwin published On the Origin of the Species, so explaining nature using random chance was not in the realm of conceivability for the people at the time. Plus, with the Catholic Church enraged by shifts in thinking by the Enlightenment, the last thing Hume wanted was to paint a target on his back with blasphemy and follow the fate of Galileo and so many other natural philosophers who spoke out a little too loudly. Using his skepticism, he would break down the argument in almost every sentence and claim presented, step by step. With the watchmaker metaphor, for example, he made it clear, for one, the argument is assuming a lot of things about the watchmaker that we can't know for certain. We would know for certain in the analogy that the watchmaker would need the ability to manipulate matter and laws of nature to wind the clock of the cosmos, but the proof in no way proves the existence of an infinitely wise and kind being, like the Abrahamic God is described as, never mind one that cares about people individually or answers prayers. Only a watchmaker that exists outside space and time, since those are conditions of the universe, and is able to set up the dominoes of causality. Hume said there is still room for a God in the equation of the cosmos, as an unmoved mover that put things in motion, but that we must be careful not to let our prejudices cloud our pursuit of truth, and to always proportion our beliefs to the evidence. Or maybe we're just thinking a bit too much about the man upstairs, and using reason to prove or disprove its existence is contradictory to the purpose of faith. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe so that you never miss a new video. Hit that like button if you enjoyed it, or if not, let me know down below what you think I can improve upon. I'm genuinely interested to know. See you in the next video.